Thank you all again. Very excited to see everyone in person and also welcome the virtual audience that we have today. So let's kick it off. I think Bill did a great job of setting the stage in terms of what the agenda is about today. And really, we've come a long way in terms of just how digital transformation has been perceived as something that's strategic for every company out there. And I think this panel, really excited to have Amy and Bill, given your diverse kind of industry experience, and just maybe we can kick off with defining automation. And Amy, I think I would request you to go first. How do you think about automation within your enterprise, a big bank like KeyBank? What is automation for you?
Sure, and thank you, and it's great to be here, and I guess I get to ladies first, right? That's the opportunity. Let me just real quickly say, in my role at Key as CIO, I also have responsibility for all of our back office operations, our contact centers, all of our servicing centers. So anything that you think about once you open an account, whether it's consumer or commercial, everything that's behind that, right? So automation is really, really important to me, both from a technology side, but also how do we make our processes more digital, more seamless, easier to use, starting with a client and how the client interacts with the financial institution all the way through to the back end, so front, middle, back office. So when we think about automation, we think about it in many ways the way Bill just talked about it. It's anything that can take manual tasks out of the process, right? And you can use a whole bunch of different technologies to do that, but it is predominantly used in our case to either make the client experience better or the employee journey easier to support our clients, right? Across all of our processes. And we started our journey back in 2019 and have accelerated the use of a myriad of tools to drive significant impact across our processes, which I know we'll get into.
Yeah.
But I think of automation very broadly in how we can apply it.
Brad, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, thank you for having us. In my world, not only we make life-saving medical devices, and not only does that mean we have high-tech products, we need to be a high-tech company. And I really think about automation in my world through the context of whether that helps us make product, or move the data around. And so it touches just a whole variety of those aspects and really interconnects them in a way that really helps us serve our patients more effectively.
Great. So I guess one of the things that keeps coming up when you think about automation is complexity, right? Mm-hmm. So it's one thing to automate like the manual tasks that everyone knows can be easily done by a computer or a robot, but it's another thing to think about complexity and that human experience. So how do you kind of apply that filter in terms of this is a good task to be automated, or how do you think about allocating your budgets? Because there are plenty of things where you can apply this concept of automation.
I would start with, when we started our journey, it was back after the hype of RPA and automation is going to eliminate all these jobs. I don't believe that, by the way. I think all of these tools help us eliminate tasks, which then you can restructure roles and functions. But I have yet to see in our journey where it's eliminated an entire job. So I put that out there. Secondly, I think when we started, we went with some of the low-hanging fruit. And we all have it. And if you look at your companies, you will have processes where there are tasks that you go, oh my goodness, there's a high volume there, and you can just automate from A to B. Once you get through that, though, the really important part, we have found the secret sauce, is getting process design engineers with subject matter experts, with these automation engineers, and those three things together working at a process end to end. You just don't want to automate processes that are inefficient today and make them faster and more inefficient. That's not necessarily a great outcome. So I think putting all those things together, again, talking about the human element of what's happening, creates this engagement from the people in the value chain so that they don't feel so threatened by what's happening either.
Yeah, and Brad, in your case, I guess the margin of error when you are talking about medical equipment is very minimal. You know, you can't afford to have any sort of even a small error in how you are thinking about automation, and that can have a huge impact, you know, both on the upside and downside. So how do you think about proof of concepts when you are thinking about automation, and how much due diligence do you have to do in that?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right? I mean, the margin of error is virtually zero. That we're making a device that if it doesn't fire when your heart does something strange, you're going to die. That's the way it works. So as we think about automation, interestingly, as Amy's talking, right, we used to think about it in replacement of tasks and what's the ROI in that, et cetera. Now we really think about it from a perspective much more on how can it improve the quality of our product? Because humans are great. Things like human visual inspection, humans are great, but they are not flawless. And the right automation solutions can be flawless. They don't get fatigued, they don't get tired. They can learn, can start to identify not just a good and bad from a library of good and bad, but actually start to become more intelligent. But as we think of proof of concept, it is really through the lens of trying to break it. We need to try to break it out of the gate and assure ourselves that it can't break. And ROI has become kind of an interesting secondary concept, but not the primary driver for us.
I agree with that.
Maybe, Amy, like, can you talk about some of the tools that you use within your company, and which are new in the sense that COVID really expedited the deployment of some of those tools, where you not only applied it successfully, but also you could see the ROI, and I think it would be interesting.
Sure, and clearly we don't make life-changing medical equipment, so we don't have to go that far, but people do get a little passionate about their money. And you actually want what money you deposit, or if you're getting a loan from an institution or you're investing, you actually want it to work. So we have to have a pretty high quality rate too. Look, the pandemic, we've all talked about this, it clearly changed the way all of us are looking at the uses of technology in cross-industry, right? And interesting being in a financial institution, you serve every industry, so you could see it. But clearly the way people want to interact with their financial institution, the consumer was already on this kind of high slope of, hey, it has to be as easy as my favorite app on my phone. But we weren't there with our commercial clients as much. So I want to take you through very quickly, when the government launched the Payment Protection Program, which was the PPP program for all of our businesses in the country, every bank was starting gate at the same time. We had to be able to take loan applications. And I was commenting that the SBA, which processed all of this, was not capable at the time of taking anything but hard signatures. Well, you can't get a hard signature when everybody's locked down. You had to go to digital signatures. So a simple thing like digital signature is a form of automation, which, you know, our commercial lenders had resisted that because they always wanted to sit down with a person, say, I need to be there to help that client. But all of a sudden, you couldn't do that. And now we have found that application of digital signatures pervasive, right? So we were able to look at every place across our institution that takes a physical signature and start to apply that. But when you really just look at that, you go, wait, look at the whole process. And so the whole process changed. We were able to use our technologies and our automation to process 46,000 loan applications and produce $11 billion of relief into our clients and our neighborhoods and our communities. We're about the 13th, 15th largest bank in the United States. Through our automation efforts and through our technology, we produce the highest number of loans for the country in that process. And that's all through using those techniques of understanding the process and applying tools, whether it be the Automation Anywhere, or whether it be things like reading documents, so OCR technologies or the digital signature technologies. But if you apply them all together, you can truly re-engineer processes in a way that can have tremendous impact.
So just to piggyback on that, what did it mean in terms of training, or reallocating some of the human jobs to some other type of jobs that they had to train for?
Yeah, I mean, that is an example of I mean, we were under pressure, and obviously we couldn't, there was no way you could hire enough people to process that manually in that short period of time, right? But today we probably have enough automation running where we're probably okay to about 400 FTE equivalent across these tasks. It does mean retraining people. It also means over time, in our case, if you're a services industry and you're not manufacturing something, it means restructuring some roles, because all of a sudden maybe 25 or 30% of their tasks are now eliminated and they've got that capacity. So what do you do with that? So you have to upskill your employees. And that's a good thing. That's a great message. This fear of my operations folks or the contact center folks saying your jobs are going away, we've gotten way past that. They look to, okay, how are you gonna make my job easier? How do you make it easier to onboard me? Because now I can learn all of these things with the Intelligent Assist versus me having to really learn them all. So I think there's all these applications you have to think about depending on what industry you're in and what opportunity you're trying to solve.
Brad, there is this notion that robots are going to take away a lot of the manufacturing jobs. Yeah. So given, if you manufacture such high-end equipments, like how much of robotics you were using prior to COVID, and what has changed over the last 2 years?
Yeah, I'd really like to follow on what Amy said, because it's the same, but it's different, right? Different space, but same issue. Pre-COVID, yes, we were automating using robots and really trying to replace tasks that either were not efficient or there was a cost benefit. But our ability to hire, recruit, bring in enough people to actually serve our business, that's become almost an existential threat for us. And so the acceleration of how we use automation, robotics, human visual inspection, augmentation, artificial intelligence to get to learning computers in this space has just accelerated dramatically for us. And similarly, what we've really done in parallel, which I think has been part of our magic, is kicked off some very aggressive initiatives with respect to what we call our direct labor, our product builder population, right? 20,000 people worldwide, on improving their skill sets, growing their careers within Boston Scientific. Because if your livelihood is based on looking through a microscope and determining whether a product is good or bad, and we say we've got a piece of automation here, we've got some capability that can get rid of that, or can improve your capabilities, or improve this process. We want all that knowledge that's in your head. We just don't want you to be looking through a microscope. We want you to be helping craft how that automation should work so that it can make better decisions. And so we really have moved toward getting automation that augments people, not replaces people.
I agree.
So then how do you go about training those robots in terms of helping them learn, what it needs to be done better, or the next version of the equipment?
Yeah, well, that is part of the, now look, I'm no deep IT expert here, but I can tell you that is one of the real benefits we've seen of the technological advancement, is that equipment is able to learn, right? So historically you had to, if we're talking about, say, visual inspection, you had to create a library of good, bad, and a piece of equipment could determine. Now, even just in the last couple years, automation has learned, it can learn. It can start to say, well, if this is good and this is bad and that's something different, I can figure out whether it's good or bad, just like a human can. And I would say we actually augment automation with humans to validate that, yeah, it's making the right decisions for a while. And then just like as you're training someone, once you figure out it actually is making the right decisions, then we can let it go on its own.
Yeah, that's great. So Amy, when we talk about automation and digital transformation, there's a lot of data being created, and that comes with its own set of problems. Does it have you worried that you've got so much data, and we're talking about sensitive customer data here? How do you go about thinking about all the vulnerabilities that can come with automation and more data that you're storing and how you are sharing that data, privacy, all those aspects that come with it.
Okay, we could talk about this for about 5 hours because that's a lot in one question. And so let me just, I'll pull it up for a moment and say, as someone who runs technology and operations and services, I feel like my job is to help digitize the enterprise from front to back. Is to constantly be challenging how are we making more automation. But to have really powerful digital journeys, they all have to be powered by analytics and data, right? The bots can't do things if they're not intelligent. Our employees can't be effective if they don't have the data at their fingertips and delivered to them in a way that they can act on it. So I think data and analytics is the fuel for any digital effort. And it has to be working together, or you're going to have really pretty front ends that are dumb. I mean, it may look good to your client in our case, but it won't do anything to the back, in the middle office, in the back office, right? And it won't learn. So I think that is really, really important. That in and of itself is a competency that most companies have to work on developing, is the data and analytics side of things, and how do you leverage that to have impact and deliver value for your company or your clients. So that's one effort. Then you talk about protecting all of that, and this does, in all of our cases, depending on where you're deploying the automation and the type of tools and on top of what technologies, it does potentially increase your attack surface for different cyber events or vulnerabilities. And so you also better be upskilling your information security, cyber security teams, your DevOps teams, DevSecOps teams, to make sure that as they are developing, they're considering all of this into the design. But then I also agree that some of this robotics can take out some risk, can take out risk of manual intrusions, if you will, or manual defects that can also lead to issues. So it certainly doesn't make your environment from a technical perspective less complex. It actually makes it more complex. And you have to know where that automation is deployed, because when you change a process, you have to re-educate the bots. Now, they learn faster than maybe 1,000 employees do, but you still have to know they're there, and you still have to know that if you don't, the process will break. So I think there's all of that you have to be really careful with as you deploy. But as you get better at it, you can see how you get faster at using these tools and more effective.
Brad, what are the points of vulnerability, and can the robots be hacked?
Well, I mean, look, just everything can be hacked. But I mean, I think historically we used to think about security really through the lens of like physical security, right? A tornado, a hurricane, something like that, right? A major breakdown in supply chain. And all kinds of redundancy, resiliency in place for that. We now certainly have added to that at a much higher level. How do we think about cybersecurity, right? So we've got segmented networks that can, they're separate, but it requires a lot of focus and diligence. I spent a lot of time talking about this and thinking about what barriers do we need to put in place? How do you segment data? Because the benefit of having all of this data available is we can make better decisions if everybody can access it. The downside of everybody being able to access it is you got to figure out how do you keep only the people you want to be able to access it have availability of it. And so, as Amy said, right, we could spend hours, and I do spend hours talking about these things, but it just requires a different way of thinking that now I have to protect this data as an asset, not just a physical location or employees or IP or whatever.
Yeah, Bill touched on a very interesting point around talent. So I want to make sure I get your views on that. As a CIO, what do you look for in terms of the talent for the future and the jobs for the future, and where do you find them?
So we all read about it, the war for talent, the great resignation, all that stuff out there. And it's real, right? We all see it. So I think you have to have a really strong talent strategy. And part of our strategy is not just to acquire, although we do acquire talent for new skills and new emerging skills and people and young talent coming out of universities, et cetera. But you also have to grow your talent and make a commitment to that. And I think with automation, it's a great place to do it. And so I'll give you an example. We launched a program we call Tech Ready, where we really targeted our internal operations and internal like contact center teammates who are entry-level jobs, who on average are making, let's say, $20 an hour. And we targeted that population to say, here's an opportunity for you to grow your career. We will pay for you to go through this program. They have to go through a battery of assessments to make sure they have the aptitude to acquire the technical skills. But they all know our processes. They come from roles that understand, and they're living and working in these processes, and quite frankly, they're the ones that feel the pain points the most. And so by taking them and teaching them technologies, now we're able to produce a whole cohort and then put them right into these automation technologies, which quite frankly are a little bit easier to start with. But that goes back to that secret sauce of saying, if you know the business process and you have a process engineer and you have a robotics engineer who knows the tools, we're able to grow our talent, and they're coming out of these programs and hitting the ground running because they're helping to re-engineer the processes they just came out of. And so it's a win-win-win. We're developing the technical talent of the future. We're changing their lives because we're able to compensate them in different ways as an entry-level engineer than they may have been, and we're able to grow the talent. So that's just one example where I think you have to get really creative in today's shortage of available talent. You also have to restructure your roles. You can't have every talent requiring 20 years of technical experience. So you have to restructure your tech roles to say, how do you bring on new talent and coach them and grow them?
Brad?
So I'd just like to start off. Amy and I have never met each other before. We just this morning. We didn't practice this. But what she said, I mean, ditto. We actually kicked off a program we called Grow. And it's the similarities are eerie. It is entry level, whether that is direct labor, technicians, or engineers, very much down the same path, right? People that understand how the work gets done. We have created a number of cohorts across the globe, upskilling these folks, and not just upskilling like we're going to train you a new job, but bringing them through more business training, financial training, a number of technical decision-making cohorts to really change the way that they are thinking about their work, because that creates then, one, loyalty. These people's lives truly, I came in to do this job, which is a paycheck, and now I have a career. And how we are leveraging automation and the evolution of that job is part and parcel of what is driving their long-term career growth. But you've got to do these things in parallel. I think if you think about automation or digitization as a replacement for people, you've got a losing scenario, because people will look at that and say, great, today my job might be safe, but the second the organization figures out how to replace me, they will. If people start to see, hey, if I get plugged into this, it actually grows my career, people will embrace automation, they will pull automation, they will seek out opportunities to make their jobs more efficient because it's directly connected to their career growth.
Final word, Amy, how will banking look like 5-10 years from now as a result of all the automation?
I hope it's easier for all of you to bank with Key and our institution. You're welcome to open your accounts, whether you are individual or a corporation. And seriously, that's our job, is to use all these technologies to make it easier, frictionless for our clients. And so 5 years from now, I think you have a more efficient, more effective institution that is delivering exceptional quality to our clients, irrespective of what continuum they're on in their life cycle.
Brad, are we going to live longer 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think the quality of our products is the price of entry for us, but our ability to deliver with speed and be more flexible and responsive to customer needs, that curve is just incredibly aggressive, and you should be fine. I'll give you my card if you can give me a call.
All right, I think that's all the time we had. I want to thank my panelists, Amy and Brad, and looking forward to the upcoming sessions.